The New Brunswick Telegraph-Journal's mission to foster civil society with a clear and constructive editorial voice is amply reflected in Jackson Dughart's editorials. The paper's editorial board sets itself the challenge of commenting only on issues reported by Brunswick News. Dughart's editorials live up to this challenge. He calls out the province for its slow and lackluster response to a catastrophic ice storm. He offers reasoned praise for a pooled pension proposal, and he explains how a Supreme Court hearing about a man ticketed for bringing beer into New Brunswick from Quebec might affect all Canadians. Dughart's work is a fine example of how a strong regional newspaper contributes to community discourse. Tony Keller of the Globe and Mail was far from the only editorialist to grapple with the significance of Canada's 150th birthday, or the controversial actions of the U.S. president, but his colorful and inventive treatment of these topics stands out. His eloquent celebration of our nation comes, cleverly, with all apologies for such an outburst of immodesty. Keller skewers the Trump tax reform plan for being a creature from the swamp, rather than a mechanism for draining it, and his incisive praise of a downtown transit pilot project for daring to think small drives home how a well-written dissection of a local issue can captivate even a national audience. Christina Spencer's editorials for the Ottawa Citizen make a cogent argument for the necessity of newspapers in Canadian civic life. She elevates a local bureaucratic failing to a metaphor for national concerns about care for the aged, weak, and vulnerable. She fires off an unconventional critique of tired taxation tropes, urging the finance minister to do better. And she stakes out the Citizen's position on a roiling local controversy, firmly and fairly grounding it in research. In these challenging times for newspapers, editorial writers are especially vulnerable to mockery as yesterday's voices, but Spencer's editorials prove their own necessity.
And the winner is Christina Spencer.
Oh, wow. First speech of the evening, so I'll try to make it short. I want to thank my husband, Don Butler, a two-time nominee for this award, Michelle Richardson, and Jerry Knott, who have been unfailingly supportive of the editorial teams of all the Post-Media papers. And I want to talk about somebody who isn't here, my mother. She inspired one of these editorials on long-term care. When I was in grade 8, I started a school newspaper. And when I was in grade 12, I started a school newspaper. When I was an undergrad, I worked for 2 different university newspapers. And at one point when I was a teenager, she said to me, "So I guess you're going to be a journalist." And being a typically recalcitrant teenager, I said, "Of course I'm not." So 40 years later, it's an honor to be standing here with this. Obviously, she's the person who I owe the most to, aside from my husband. If she could be here, she'd be very proud. And thank you. And thank you very much to the Ryan family. I had only found out tonight about the naming of this prize, and it is vraiment un honneur. Merci beaucoup.